You've certainly heard the fascinating story of Moses, the man who challenged an empire and led the Israelites to freedom, breaking the chains of slavery in Egypt. But there's one question few ask. Who was the Pharaoh that faced Moses? The book of Exodus tells us about a stubborn ruler who resisted the signs and wonders of the God of Israel until the very end. But what was his name? Who was the man behind the crown whose hardened heart brought Egypt to chaos? Today, we'll explore this intriguing question and examine the historical and biblical evidence that may reveal the identity of this enigmatic pharaoh. Get ready for a journey full of mystery, revelations, and surprising discoveries. Comment your thoughts, and stay with us until the end to not miss any details. Who was the pharaoh in Moses' time? The identity of the pharaoh mentioned in the book of Exodus has been the subject of intense debate throughout history. He was the ruler who challenged God, had his heart hardened, and refused to free the Israelite slaves, triggering the plagues that ravaged Egypt. The Bible, one of the ancient texts that most frequently mentions Egyptian civilization, refers to various pharaohs at different times, including the one who interacted with Abraham, the one who elevated Joseph to a position of prominence, and of course, the one who faced Moses. A widely held belief reinforced by films and TV shows associates the Pharaoh of the Exodus with Ramses II, one of the most famous rulers of ancient Egypt. However, this identification presents inconsistencies, particularly regarding the biblical chronology. According to the scriptures, the traditional date of the Exodus does not align with Ramses II's reign, making it unlikely that he was the pharaoh mentioned. Additionally, scholars suggest other possibilities, proposing that the true pharaoh of the Exodus might have been a lesser-known ruler who better fits the historical context and the events described. Among the names frequently mentioned are Thutmose from the Hyksos dynasty and Amenhotep II, whose profile aligns with some of the biblical descriptions. The search for this identity is not just a matter of historical curiosity, but also a fundamental element in understanding the geopolitical and religious context of the time. As we delve deeper into this investigation, we realize that identifying the Pharaoh of the Exodus goes beyond popular narratives and requires a thorough analysis of historical, archaeological, and theological sources. After all, understanding who truly ruled Egypt during that period could shed new light on one of the most significant events in the Bible and in human history. The Pharaoh who faced Moses and Aaron has been the subject of intense debates, but a significant archaeological discovery casts doubt on the traditional association of this ruler with Ramses II. This interpretation, widely spread by cinema and some academic perspectives, proves to be incorrect for several reasons. First, Ramses II did not engage in any battle against slaves or servants of Semitic origin within Egypt. Furthermore, historical records indicate that during his time, the Semitic presence in Egyptian territory was not as large as commonly assumed, which weakens this theory even further. One of the most intriguing discoveries that challenges this conventional view is the Merneptah Stele, a monument of extreme historical relevance. This artifact belonging to Pharaoh Merneptah, the son and successor of Ramses II, contains one of the first mentions of Israel outside the Bible. The inscription reports the military campaigns of the pharaoh and explicitly mentions Israel as an established and organized entity in Canaan, rather than as a people enslaved in Egypt or a nomadic group without a defined identity. This archaeological evidence is crucial, as it suggests that by Merneptah's time, the Israelites were already outside Egypt, contradicting the theory that Ramses II was the pharaoh of the Exodus. Another relevant point is the dating of the Merneptah Stele, estimated to be from December. This detail is essential because it establishes a temporal marker that reinforces the idea that the Exodus must have occurred before this period. If the Israelites were already settled in Canaan by this time, their departure from Egypt must have happened at least several decades earlier, during the reign of a previous pharaoh. The Israelites had already established themselves in the land of Canaan, were stabilized, and had overcome 40 years in the desert. During this period, they faced Canaanite peoples and conquered their lands. The territorial markers of the Israelites in Canaan suggest that for all of this to have occurred, Moses' era must have been at least 150 years before Merneptah's reign. This conclusion is based on the need for a significant period for the Israelites to settle and consolidate in the land of Canaan before Merneptah's arrival in Egypt and his confrontation with them as a fully structured people. This evidence challenges the theory that Ramses II was the pharaoh mentioned in the book of Exodus. Instead, it points to the possibility that the pharaoh during Moses' time could have been Thutmose III. Thutmose III, also known as Thutmosis or Thutmose III, was one of the most notable pharaohs of ancient Egypt, belonging to the 18th dynasty circa 1479 to 1425 BCE. Known as the Napoleon of Egypt due to his military genius and the vast territorial expansion he promoted, Thutmose III is considered one of the greatest strategists in Egyptian history. During his reign, he conducted numerous successful military campaigns, consolidating Egypt as a superpower of the time. Initially, Thutmose III ascended to the throne at a young age after the death of his stepmother, the powerful Queen Hatshepsut, one of the few women to rule Egypt as pharaoh. At the beginning of his reign, his authority was partially limited by advisors loyal to the former ruler. But over time, he consolidated his power and began an era of expansion and prosperity for Egypt. In addition to his military conquests, Thutmose III was also a great administrator and patron of the arts and architecture, promoting the construction of temples and monuments that exalted the glory of the Egyptian empire. If the hypothesis that he was the pharaoh during Moses' time is correct, it would reframe the traditional interpretation of biblical events, suggesting a different historical context for the Exodus, and raising new questions about the relationship between Egypt and Israel in ancient times. Thutmose III's most famous military campaign was the Battle of Megiddo, fought around 1457 BC. This battle is notable for being one of the first in history to be extensively recorded, with accounts carved into the walls of the Karnak temple. Thutmose III described the strategy, challenges, and Egyptian victory, showcasing not only his skill as a warrior, but also his talent as a strategist. The victory at Megiddo consolidated Egyptian control over a vast portion of the Levant, securing tributes and strengthening the empire's influence in the region. In addition to his military feats, Thutmose III was also known as a great builder. During his reign, he ordered the construction of temples, obelisks, and monuments that extolled not only his glory, but also the greatness of his pagan Egyptian gods. He was a fervent devotee of the deities of the Egyptian pantheon, promoting religious reforms and expanding temples dedicated to Amun-Ra, to whom he attributed his victories and achievements. As archaeological research advances, new evidence continues to shed light on the events and figures of antiquity, offering more precise interpretations of biblical times. If Thutmose III was indeed the pharaoh during Moses' time, it would drastically change the way we understand the Exodus narrative, bringing a new perspective on the interaction between Egypt and the Hebrews. An intriguing detail in this hypothesis is the very name Thutmose. In Egyptian, it means born of Thoth or son of Thoth, referring to the deity of wisdom and writing. If this was the pharaoh who confronted Moses and God, the meaning of his name adds a new layer of symbolism to the conflict. On one side, Moses, guided by the God of the Hebrews. On the other, a ruler whose name bears the mark of one of the Egyptian gods. It is interesting to note that the names Thutmose and Moses share a remarkable phonetic similarity, especially in the prefix Tut, which refers to a naming style common in the 18th dynasty of Egypt. In fact, in the culture of the time, the inclusion of a divine or royal name was a common practice indicating lineage, destiny, or spiritual protection. This reinforces the theory that the name Moses was not originally Hebrew but Egyptian, reflecting the linguistic and cultural tradition of the period. The meaning of the name Moses also raises interesting questions. Contrary to the idea that it may have Hebrew or Phoenician roots, his name was supposedly given by the pharaoh's daughter when she found him in the waters of the Nile, as described in the biblical account. In Egyptian, the suffix s or sis was a common element in royal names, and often meant son of or born of, appearing in names like Ramses, son of Ra, and Thutmoses, born of Thoth. Curiously, in ancient Aramaic, Moses was pronounced as Mushi, a variation that further reinforces the Egyptian linguistic influence on the prophet's identity. In ancient Egypt, choosing a name was a profoundly significant act. The Egyptians believed that a person's name contained life force and influenced their destiny both in life and in eternity. The first name or given name was often selected based on factors such as birth conditions, celestial events, prophecies, or the parent's aspirations for the child. It was not uncommon for names to be associated with deities. The ancient Hebrew Phoenician version of the name Moses is Moshe, and both share a similar meaning translated as taken from the waters or son of the waters. An intriguing detail is the similarity between the ses ending in the name Ramses and the structure of the name Moses, as both indicate son of. This parallel suggests a possible linguistic connection between the names, reinforcing the idea that Moses may have had an Egyptian origin name that later underwent modifications. The presence of the s's ending, meaning son of, leads to the hypothesis that Moses's original name was adapted due to the influences of the Egyptian religious context. Considering that the Pharaoh's daughter found him in the Nile River, it is plausible that she chose a name inspired by deities associated with water, reflecting both the child's origin and the religious beliefs of the time. Regarding chronology, there are indications that Moses lived around 1500 BC or 1480 BC instead of the traditional dating of December. This temporal reassessment aligns with the possibility of his existence during the reign of pharaohs such as Thutmose III. During this period, events linked to Moses' leadership in the liberation of the Hebrews and the divine intervention described in the scriptures would have occurred. The analysis of Thutmose III's tomb and other archaeological evidence further complicates this discussion, requiring a detailed examination to better understand the true chronology of events. We can find various pieces of evidence that reinforce the credibility of the biblical account described in the book of Exodus, particularly when analyzing the tomb of Pharaoh Thutmose III. Among the records, there are mentions of a great flood, often associated with the episode of the Red Sea crossing, when, according to the biblical narrative, the Hebrew people escaped Egyptian oppression. An intriguing aspect of this discovery is the absence of Thutmose III's mummy in his own tomb. In its place, the body of a significantly younger individual was found, raising questions about the fate of the pharaoh and possible connections to the events narrated in Exodus. Additionally, archaeological finds such as ancient Egyptian war chariot wheel axles found at the bottom of the Red Sea, and other artifacts dated to the period provide additional clues that support the historicity of this event. These findings, along with other evidence from biblical archaeology, strengthen the legitimacy of the sacred scriptures and corroborate the possibility that events such as the Red Sea crossing have a real historical basis. By integrating historical accounts and archaeological discoveries, it is possible to establish new perspectives on the authenticity of biblical texts and their impact throughout the ages. It is worth noting that Thutmose III's tomb not only indicates the occurrence of the flood, but also suggests the possible tragedy that befell the pharaoh, whose fate may have been sealed in the Red Sea. We thank everyone who watched the video up to this point. Leave your comment if you already knew about the pharaoh of Moses' time, and send us suggestions for other scripture topics for future videos. May God bless you and see you soon.